The committee has been focusing heavily on what President Donald Trump did in the weeks leading up to the riot at the Capitol and what he did that day. That commission is going through talks right now. I know that you made headlines recently when you said it will be interesting to reveal all the participants that were involved. Can you expand on that comment? Well, you've already got a lot of things working against each other now. You've got a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican-led House that seems confused as to how they're going to work together. A leak like this is essentially unheard of and a breach of tradition here at the Supreme Court. You know, we started the day with 9 cases left, and people, because of that leak, that unprecedented leak, when Politico published the draft of Alito's majority opinion, people have been out here every single decision day. This is the second time that President Joe Biden has traveled to Kentucky to survey damage from a natural disaster in less than a year. Complaints of mail delivery delays became even louder during the pandemic when more people relied on the Postal Service for the delivery of necessary items. You've spoken out against career politicians and even helped co-sponsor legislation to put term limits into place. Do you consider yourself a career politician at this point? He started off the day with this, calling out Republicans for what he calls attacks on Judge Jackson that happened yesterday in the first day of questioning. He implied that some of the Republicans are using this questioning time to make their bid for higher office. You are the only Democrat in this delegation, in both the House and the Senate. What is your advice to them in working with people that they probably don't agree with on a lot of issues? Independent of these federal charges, a separate team from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is conducting a civil investigation. This is the first summit for the leaders of these 3 nations since a gathering in Canada back in 2016 when Barack Obama was president. There was no such meeting when Donald Trump was in the White House, partly because of his disputes with his Canadian and Mexican counterparts.
Your grandparents were President and First Lady. I know you were very little. Were there any fun memories from that big White House?
Well, this is my first time out here at Churchill Downs, and before making the trip to Kentucky, I had the chance to speak with a few members of the Kentucky delegation about what the Kentucky Derby means for the state. There's actually another member of the House who began serving the same day Rogers did, Republican Chris Smith of New Jersey. But when 2 members enter Congress on the same day, seniority is determined alphabetically, and of course R comes just before S. Former President Donald Trump touched off an uproar when he used his Truth Social account to say that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has a, quote, death wish.
Leading public officials, former presidents, current presidents, candidates, pundits, should not be implying political violence. They should not say people have death wishes. They should not make racist attacks.
Trump went after McConnell for voting in favor of a stopgap funding measure that included disaster relief funds and money to help Ukraine. The compromise on the bill kept the government from shutting down just 6 weeks before the midterm elections.
You're on Team Trump, or you're being thrown under the bus. Donald Trump has made this clear again and again over his career. He will attack anybody at any moment for any reason.
Trump also used racist terms to describe McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. Chao served as Secretary of Transportation under Trump, but resigned after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, calling the riot a traumatic and entirely avoidable event. Just a few weeks ago, citing candidate quality, McConnell said that it was more likely Republicans gain control of the House than the Senate. Many assumed he was referring to a group of Trump-backed Republicans.
We saw Senator McConnell try to recruit moderate, just sort of less vitriolic, less angry, less burn-it-down candidates in a lot of these primaries. Once those candidates lost, Senator McConnell said, okay, well, here's what we got, so let's see if we can make this work.
This is just the latest example of Trump publicly criticizing McConnell. Just a few days before the social media post, I spoke with the Republican National Committee's communication director about this pattern and whether the RNC sees this type of rhetoric hurting the Republican Party as a whole.
Listen, the one thing that I can say is we are all in the same boat and trying to win Republican majorities in the House and Senate this November. There might be discussions and differences in the nuances, but overall, we know that we have to win back majorities.
Spectrum News reached out to McConnell's office for comment on the post and has not heard back yet. A former McConnell aide spoke out on CNN, calling the post outrageous, adding it's beyond the pale. Every
Republican ought to say so. In Washington, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, began working for the government in 1968 when Lyndon B. Johnson was president. Now, after 54 sometimes tumultuous years, he'll step down at the end of the month.
Every day for all of those years, I've given it everything that I have, and I've never left anything on the field.
For the last 38 years, Fauci has been the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
In that capacity, one of the things I did was to develop a very robust AIDS program, which in collaboration with the pharmaceutical companies have developed most of the drugs that have now been used to be life-saving combinations of drugs for people who are living with HIV. That has saved millions of lives.
The Brooklyn-born Fauci has advised 7 presidents, both Democrat and Republican, on health policy. He lists working with President George W. Bush on an emergency plan for AIDS relief among his proudest accomplishments. In 2008, Bush presented Fauci with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
It's been a very, very long haul, but there have been phases during those decades that things were done not alone, with a lot of help from a lot of very good people that I feel very good about.
Although Fauci has been with the government for decades, most Americans only became familiar with him in 2020 when the coronavirus crisis erupted. Fauci regularly stood at the White House podium giving guidance to Americans on how to navigate the outbreak. Faced with a rapidly spreading and dangerous virus, Fauci and other public health officials recommended Americans take significant steps like wearing masks and limiting the size of public gatherings. Those changes impacted everyday life and played a role in a massive economic disruption. Some Republican lawmakers have criticized his guidance, but Fauci says it saved lives.
I don't belong in any affiliation to any party, and I stay away from politics and stay with science. The people who want to politicize science have politicized science. I have not politicized what I've done.
Some Republican politicians, notably Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, are questioning how the COVID-19 pandemic began. Some suggesting the virus leaked from a lab in China 3 years ago and accusing Fauci's team of funding research there. Members of Paul's party have indicated they'll subpoena the disease expert when Republicans gain control of the House in 2023. Fauci said he would cooperate fully.
We can defend and explain and stand by everything that we've said, so I have nothing to hide.
Stepping down from government work doesn't mean he plans to slow down.
Want to comment on what's next?
You know, I don't know, to be honest with you, because as a government employee, particularly at my someone as at my level, being an advisor to the president, it is not appropriate for me to negotiate what I'm going to be doing after I leave government.
Fauci says that although he's not positive about the next step, he is positive that it will not involve politics.
I want to continue in the public arena. I want to be writing and lecturing about public health issues, about global health issues, perhaps inspiring younger people to get involved in public service.
Speaking at his final White House press briefing before stepping away from his post, Fauci urged Americans to get their updated COVID-19 shots as soon as they are eligible. People can visit vaccines.gov to find a location. In Washington, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News. This is the second time that President Joe Biden has traveled to Kentucky in less than a year to survey damage from a natural disaster. In December, western Kentucky experienced deadly tornadoes that killed 77 people there. This time, flooding in eastern Kentucky has killed more than 36 people, with 2 people still missing.
It is true that the people here in this community in western Kentucky and the folks I met in the tornado, they're not just Kentuckians, they're Americans. They're Americans. This happened in America. American problem. And we're all Americans. Everybody has an obligation to help.
Biden was joined by Democratic Governor Andy Beshear and Republican Congressman Hal Rogers, who represents eastern Kentucky in Congress. Both thanked Biden for his swift action on approving a federal disaster declaration for the counties impacted.
We're grateful for the president for a number of things. First, one of the fastest disaster declarations we've ever seen. Congressman and I were talking, it might be the fastest.
The group with the president visited people in the area who lost their homes in the storms and are working to recover. People like Phyllis Bush, who spoke with the president today.
This was our house. That's where we were living, this old house here. The water just came so quickly, just up to her knees, and they came and got us in a boat.
Her husband, Willie, said it was difficult to do an interview because he lost his hearing aids in the storm.
During his speech today, Biden promised to continue to advocate for the people here and said that he would be back to check on the progress. In Eastern Kentucky, Julia Benbrook, Spectrum News.